Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. I am Michelle Brown, the founder and CEO of CommonLit, and I'm so excited to be sharing the launch of our CommonLit 360 curriculum, our full year English Language Arts curriculum, OER, completely openly licensed and available on a digital platform. Really excited. So just a few quick things. CommonLit is a 501c3 nonprofit organization. We're best known for operating commonlit.org, a website that has grown to serve incredibly 22 million registered teachers and students. We're best known today as a supplemental tool. So today we'll be talking about what it will mean for CommonLit to move into the core instructional market with our brand new flagship program, CommonLit 360. And so here's our agenda for the next hour. So first, I'm going to talk a little bit about just why we built 360. What was the rationale? What were we aiming for? We'll look at some data from our pilot schools. Then I have Adrian, my colleague here, who will do a demo of the curriculum materials. You'll get to see some of the brand new tech that we developed, never before seen by teachers, except because we engineered some of it this summer. So brand new to CommonLit, really exciting. And then I have so much has gone into CommonLit 360. It's been an effort of the past 3 years. I'll talk more about that. But so I have some stakeholders of the curriculum who will introduce themselves in just a moment. And then finally, we'll end with a Q&A and wrap up. So before I go any further, I just want our side to introduce ourselves, starting with Adrian.
Hello, everyone. My name is Adrian Favors, and I have the honor and privilege of creating amazing learning experiences for students. As a curriculum writer, I really enjoy the work that I do and really ensuring that students have an empowering and transformative education. So once again, I'm Adrian. I'll talk to you a little bit later.
And I'll pass it to Eric next.
Hey everyone, my name is Eric Colazzo. I am a principal at Washington Leadership Academy, a charter high school in Washington, D.C., and I had the pleasure of working with CommonLit from the very first days of implementation. So I'll get to share that a little bit later too.
And last, Jennifer, go for it.
Hi everyone, my name is Jennifer Lane. I'm a 7th grade honors English teacher. I work at Middle School 226 in South Ozone Park. And I've also had the privilege of being a part of the CommonLit program since the beginning in the pilot. So very excited to be here.
Cool. Okay, so this is our agenda. And just a few logistics before we start. So we have our team. Actually, Kara is here with us from our side to answer any questions that you have throughout the webinar. So to do that, just send it directly to her as it pops it in your mind through the Q&A. So you don't need to use the raise hand feature or anything like that. But then during the panel discussion, we'll be sourcing additional questions through the chat. So you can also use the chat later on. Okay. So just macro level, big picture, CommonLit is on a mission to close persistent opportunity gaps in literacy education nationally. And these opportunity gaps run deep. Today in America, only 20% of students who go to low-income schools can read on grade level. At CommonLit, we think that this is, the number one basic thing that a school should do. And it's a failure of our public education system to deliver on a key promise for students equitably. So we're not going to rest until we close these persistent opportunity gaps. So what's our theory of change? How are we actually going to do this? So CommonLit 3 years ago, back in 2018, we were a supplemental tool. We really took a step back and we said, okay, what is the impact of our supplemental program and how can we help schools really move the needle and really dig deep to get the kind of impact that we wanted to have? And so we did this big survey of administrators. We talked to dozens of them all over the country. We observed classrooms. And what we essentially found is that schools and districts really lacked coherence with their instructional program. So in a lot of cases, middle schools and high schools were adopting pieces of the curriculum from different vendors. In many cases, the curriculum in secondary school was something that teachers developed. Sometimes it was a package program, but then the assessments might be from a different vendor. And it didn't really measure what it was intended to measure and had no link. And the training that teachers were getting was both infrequent and not actually based in the materials or even in the domain in many cases. Like I'm sure y'all have heard of math teachers and reading teachers kind of lumped into the same PD programs together. We were hearing that a lot from school and district leaders across the country. And then in terms of just data, something to orient everyone in the building toward, we saw that there were kind of on dashboard overload, where they had a lot of different dashboards for all the tools, but not really one place where it brought it all together. So 360 was our vision to really deepen CommonLit's impact. We started building this whole thing out 3 years ago, starting with the curriculum. We think curriculum, if I had to bet, that is like the one game-changing thing that I would say would really move the needle in reading and writing achievement. Why? Because curriculum really defines what teachers and students do together in the classroom every day. What the material, the content that they're moving through, it sounds obvious when you think about it, but it really is a key intervention. We see it as a huge lever for change. And what we also saw is that the market was really lacking. It was lacking in a few ways. One, when we entered this market and when we did our landscape analysis, we understood that it was dominated primarily by large legacy textbook publishers, and that where their programs were very expensive, have extremely high barriers to entry, they're inflexible for educators. And when we interview teachers about these programs, they have a notoriously low teacher satisfaction and also notoriously low actual utilization in classrooms. So just because what we found in our research is that just because a district has adopted a program or paid for a program didn't actually mean that it was reaching students in important ways. So teachers were really left scrambling and looking for materials online, which is my experience when I was in the classroom too. So this is our theory of change. So how did it all begin? Well, we started building out the curriculum itself, and we have Eric here. He's going to tell you the whole story and all about it later on in the panel discussion. But so we started this back in school year 2018 with our first Brave School, Washington Leadership Academy, which is based in our backyard. Our office is in DC. And so we saw so many shared values with that school. They found the same problems in the market. And they actually helped co-fund and co-develop the materials for high school as well, just the whole vision for it. And so that was the first. After just the first year of implementation at Washington Leadership Academy, we saw really impressive growth, which you tend to not see the first year after a brand new adoption of a new program, of moving students into proficient in advance on the PARC assessment. We also saw these trends continue on our own interim assessments. So we were administering these assessments to WLA, but also to schools that didn't have access to 360. And so we could look at their growth comparatively. And we also saw that our efforts to really lean in and support all students through the program was working. We saw that students with disabilities were improving at a faster rate. So this led to an expansion. So with a bigger investment from New Schools Venture Fund and Robin Hood, we grew our pilot to 50 schools nationally. And we got an investment from the Robin Hood Foundation to build out our middle school curriculum and pilot it in 11 schools in New York City. And we have Jennifer Lane, who's here to share that experience. So what was this like? So I don't know how other publishers develop their curricula, but I can tell you that we were focused on feedback. And we were obsessed with collecting a massive amount of feedback. The way that the lessons and units looked at the beginning is nothing like the way they look today. It really has had a complete 360 evolution. We observed nearly 300 hours of classroom instruction. So this is our small team going in and seeing, how would this lesson land? Our students, what are our riskiest assumptions? How can we overcome these? And we also really wanted to ask students about their experience, which, I think is often something that is just missed. Students are really good at telling you whether or not they're engaged, it turns out, and it's really accurate. And so we collected nearly 5,000 surveys after every unit. We talked to them, we interviewed them, and we also had data from our back end. And so we measured all sorts of things: student achievement, student engagement, teacher and administrator satisfaction. We looked in growth in professional practice when we introduced new routines to teachers, ones that we knew would really move the needle, usability and usage. And so in our design years, in those 3 years, there were 3 things that I would say were our North Star. The first was teacher satisfaction. We knew that this would make or break our curriculum. And it would also make or break adoption of an openly licensed curriculum. When you don't have a mandate from your school or district, satisfaction and excitement is what's going to drive adoption. And I'll share what some of the predictors were of this, which is really interesting. Second is student engagement. So what do we mean by that? When we interviewed teachers about what they didn't like about their existing curricula, whether they themselves developed it, whether it was a packaged program, this thing about student engagement kept coming up. Like, I just want my students to be more engaged. I want them to, and we're like, okay, what does that mean? They want them writing more. They want them answering more questions, speaking to each other, getting excited about the material. And so we measured all of these facets of student engagement. And last is cultural responsiveness. It will be not shocking to many of you on the webinar that a lot of the existing and packaged material in the market is very weight-centric and doesn't offer a lot of diverse perspectives. We wanted to build something truly different and truly diverse that would really honor students' experiences, validate them, and their humanity. So how did we do? Well, a few points before I turn it over to Adrian to actually see the materials. One is that teacher satisfaction was consistently high. Even in the earliest stages, and this improved over time. So our net promoter score, how likely are you to recommend this unit to a colleague, was a 90.2. Interestingly, we found out that usability and that user friendliness was a big driver of teacher satisfaction. And so look here where, we have so many strongly agrees and agrees in this category compared to other platform. CommonLit lessons save me time, are easy to prepare and are easy to actually teach and facilitate. So this was a really key, I would say, innovation in our process of developing the materials, where we would actually take a brand new lesson hot off the press from Adrian and then have someone in the office, literally with no teaching experience, sometimes an intern, see if they could at a glance live teach the lesson. These are, people who didn't have a background in teaching, but just to see if it was understandable in the most basic ways. Student engagement was also a highlight overall. These are just some testimonials from some of the students. It was so great to hear them actually talking about what they were learning, which is really unique to see from student surveys. They're like articulating the goals and the content of the unit. We thought that was such a big win. And in terms of cultural responsiveness, we had a couple of schools fill out a CRE rubric, and they rated us highly on the CRE rubric and told us that, compared to other materials in the market, they really could tell that we were intentional about this. And so we also recently got a grant from the Hewlett Foundation to even fill some of the gaps in the canon that exists, because we really found this when we were curating for the units themselves, especially in terms of, short stories with diverse protagonists, just how lacking this is in the grades that we serve. Okay, so hopefully you're so excited now to just see the materials. And I know that many of you on the call have heard me preach and talk about this, but I just want to turn it over to Adrian so that she can show you the platform, and then we'll come back to hear from everyone else.
Well, hello, everyone. My name is Adrian again, and I'm going to take you through learning more about CommonLit resources and just what is CommonLit 360. Since I'm working with a couple of platforms, I'm going to actually not mute myself, but I'm going to stop my video. And that's just going to ensure that we have a stronger event-free technological experience. All right, so let me just get here where I can stop my video. Perfect. And so one of the things I would like to start with is, what is CommonLit 360? Well, CommonLit 360 is a free, comprehensive full-year curriculum. As we've mentioned before, it includes grades 6 through 10, and it includes lots of new content plus lots of nice, new, exciting features. And so as I go through today's demonstration, I will be sharing with you the resources that are available to teachers and schools. One of the things I'm really excited, and one of the things I love sharing with teachers, was just how ready to use our materials are. And then also, we have shared this before, but I would like to highlight this was developed alongside 50 schools nationally. So in CommonLit 360, this is a view of our curriculum in terms of the structure of the curriculum. So there are 6 units per grade, and each grade includes every unit. Y'all, my mouth is like all over the place. Each unit includes everything you need for instruction. So the units include different genres. For example, unit 1s look at short stories. Unit 2s are multi-genre. So students are looking at poetry. They're looking at nonfiction and fiction, all the way up to a research unit, as well as an evidence-based argument unit. Let's take a closer look at the progression across a unit of units across a particular grade. As you look at the progression across a grade, you'll notice that our units build in terms of rigor. So students move from reading single stories in terms of short fiction here to reading multi-genre and making cross-textual connections, all the way to our novel units where students are actually reading longer pieces of work. It also grows in terms of the writing expectations. So here in Unit 4, students are writing a research paper, as well as in Unit 6, students are writing an argument. The last thing I'd like to share with you about the overview of CommonLit 360 is our vertical alignment feature. So as you see here in grade 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10, all of our unit 1s are focused on similar skills and the same genre. So imagine you're an instructional support leader in a building. This is an amazing resource for you. And it does, again, speak to the type of coherence a school and teachers can provide in terms of professional development and learning and support. Now I'm going to escape out of this deck because it's time to go to the platform. Like, we want to see CommonLit 360. What does the curriculum look like? So here is CommonLit 360 on our platform. And I'm going to just take a minute to walk you through the units. So what could you expect in each of our unit 1s, our unit 2s, our unit 3s, before we take a deep dive into one unit in particular? So here we have in 6th grade, unit 1. So all of our unit 1s are focused on students building strong skills around short stories. And so students are really digging into literary devices and also literary elements and what does it mean to have a theme or know the theme of a text. In 6th grade, unit 1 is looking at characters who grow and change. And so it's that idea of like a character who learns something very important over the course of a text. In 7th grade, students are looking at the unit, in and out, or struggle to belong. And so this looks at exploring our universal human need to belong. In 8th grade, we have unit 1 is bad behavior. This is one of our beloved units. Students love reading these nail-biting stories and looking at characters who have to make critical moral decisions. In 9th grade, our unit 1 is looking at fall in the crowd. And it's like, what is it? How does being in a group affect a person's behavior and decision-making? In 10th grade, we have our unit 1, which is coming of age and looking at students making those realizations about the adult world around them. As we begin to look at our unit 2s, unit 2 is one of our multi-genre units. And so in this multi-genre unit, students are looking at things such as poetry, nonfiction, and fiction. So in 6th grade, we have failure and success, and students are learning about the idea that sometimes failure, and in many times failure, is a predecessor to our ultimate success. In 7th grade, we have adolescence, our unit on adolescence, and that crazy period of becoming an adolescent and just how wild it is. So students are reading amazing short stories, again, nonfiction, as well as poetry, and making strong cross-textual connections while they build knowledge. In unit 2, we come upon one of my favorite texts, which is an interview of one of the Greensboro 4 who sat at the Woolsworth counter and protested segregation. So students are really having a great opportunity to just learn about different types of event history, as well as just many, many different types of knowledge. In unit 2, in 9th grade, students are looking at the connection between people and the environment. So wonderful poetry about turtles, the loss of bees. Students are just getting a great chance to look at what is that connection to people in the environment and how what we do does change the environment. In 10th grade, we have unit 2 is science fiction and commentary. I won't tell you too much about that because this is actually the unit we are going to take a look at momentarily. As we move into our unit 3s, one of the ways CommonLit 360 builds in rigor, students are reading novels. And so in unit 3 for our 6th graders, they're reading The Watsons Go to Birmingham. In 7th grade, they're looking at the novel The Giver. In 8th grade, our students are looking at Brown Girl Dreaming. In 9th grade, schools and teachers are reading and students are reading Animal Farm. And then in 10th grade, we are addressing Things Fall Apart. And then before we head into our deep dive of looking at one particular unit, I want to share with you our unit 4s. Our unit 4s in the curriculum for every grade is a research unit. And so students are reading multiple pieces of text, gleaning understanding, taking notes, annotating, working with other students to understand, and then they're taking a stance, a position, or making a suggestion based on their research. So students are receiving explicit instruction in authentic research. In unit 4, students are looking at the ways our oceans are changing and the effects of human pollution. And they're saying, here's the one way the ocean is changing, that I would like to advocate for change. As we look at seventh graders are researching social media and they're exploring, is social media risky or rewarding? And so they'll take their learning from their research and ultimately have to tell us what is the cost and benefits of engaging in social media. In eighth grade, unit 4 is looking at contact sports. Is it worth the risk? So again, students are grappling with a very interesting and provocative question. They're reading research and they're having to come up with their own assessment. Is contact sports worth the risk? In ninth grade, students are looking at the science of branding. Like we buy a lot of things, but do we know why we buy the things we buy? And so in this particular unit, students again are gleaning information, looking at the psychology behind advertising techniques, and really putting that into play in their final project. In unit 4, I just want to take a moment to stop here and talk a little bit about this unit and just some of the great features that are not only in this unit, but all of our unit 4s. In this research unit, this is called the fashion industry past to present, and it's taking a look at the textile industry, beginning with one of our first textile mills, the Lowell Mill System in Massachusetts. Students are reading primary documents. They're reading these incredible letters from the ladies who worked in the factories, the women who worked in the factories. They're also examining political cartoons and looking for those shared themes and distilling those essential learnings that could be a part of both of those. Like, what do we learn when we look at these in conjunction to each other? They're also learning about our present cheap, fast fashion industry. So the idea of our clothes, like, we have cheap clothes, but where do they come from and what are the impact? And all of this is going to set students up to be able to pick a brand of their choice, research it, write about the practices they use, and then give a humanity rating. So when we look at our research units and all of the things that students are learning, they're building incredible amounts of knowledge, and they are also working collaboratively with each other and making, being able to just demonstrate their learning in many unique ways. So I'm going to click into Unit 2 from 10th grade. Now let's take a look at what's included in a CommonLit 360 unit. So here is Unit 2, Science Fiction and Social Commentary. And one of the first places I like to stop is our unit guide. And so in all of our 360 units, every single one of them comes with one of these beautiful unit guides. And these are here to help teachers internalize the unit and plan for instruction. So you'll see from this guide, it is comprehensive. It shows you all the different domains of English that students are learning through our unit. We have reading, we have our writing, we have our grammar skills. This unit guide is also one-stop shopping for teachers. And so it allows them to plan. So we have the arc of reading instruction, the arc of writing instruction, and then they get a pacing guide that helps them to make decisions around planning in their classroom. What's essential, what's optional, moving into what's recommended. So as we move back to that materials page, I also wanted to just share with you, additionally on this page, those same resources are there. So teachers have multiple ways to understand what's happening in a unit. Let's look at the lesson and materials tab. I alluded to this earlier, but I just want to take another moment to share the joy and excitement about how readily accessible the materials are with CommonLit 360. So here on this page, everything a teacher needs to implement instruction in their classroom is here. I'm just going to just talk to you about the different resources. Some of them we'll click into, some of them will not, but I'll just share with you. So teachers have access to a writing baseline. We also provide supplemental texts. These texts are in English. These texts are also in Spanish, so just great for differentiation. We also provide independent reading and book club resources. So students are able to have agency over what they read, as well as making those choices about what they want to read. So here we have a unit introduction, and to save us a little time, I've already clicked into it, but this is an editable Google slide doc that teachers have access to. This is a great way that teachers are able to introduce the unit to students. So we have amazing images, we have great questions. In this particular unit, we're looking at science fiction and how science fiction can be social commentary, and we can learn about our society. So we're getting students to think about some of those big ideas. We're asking students to turn and talk. We're asking students to rate, disagree, strongly disagree. And so again, students are given an opportunity to really dig into the unit's theme before they actually dig into any of the work. Now, as we continue looking at it, we also have vocabulary. And so we are using a best practice of teaching vocabulary for students and also continue to build our students' word knowledge. I'm going to now go through our reading anchor lessons and just tell you a little bit about each of these. As a part of CommonLit units and and knowledge building that happens, we provide these texts for students to read. In this particular unit, students are reading great works of science fiction and writing and talking about how science fiction conventions offer social critique. So here we have the Velt. And for those who may not be familiar with the Velt is probably one of our worst nightmares ever imagined. It is a story about a smart home that goes wrong. So again, in this unit, we have students reading fiction. As we move down a little bit further, we have our nonfiction text. So in this nonfiction text, students are looking at the benefits of scientific advancements. So a lot of times when we look at science fiction, it's like everything goes awry, but there's actually a lot of good that we've learned from science fiction. Students are actually engaging in poetry. This one's from Margaret Atwood, so award-winning poet, and students are learning about time capsule on a dead planet. As we continue to look at others, we have additional fiction, the cooking time, and then I'm actually going to stop here at the wretched and the beautiful. When I say without a shadow of a doubt, this is my favorite text in the entire curriculum, I am not lying. One of the reasons I really, really love The Wretched and the Beautiful is its ability to communicate important and critical themes in our world through this text. The Wretched and the Beautiful is an allegory about how we treat people. And what happens in this text is aliens land on Earth as refugees from their home planet. They look different, they're smelly, they're using all of our resources, and they're treated terribly. And so one of the things that students get an opportunity to learn by reading a text like this is they get to make those connections to, do we see that in our world? How is that similar to our lives? So the 360 curriculum teaches students to get to the deeper meaning of a text. On its surface, it's a story about aliens arriving, but what is it really saying? What's the theme? What's the message? So by zooming out, we allow science fiction to help us see the world around us, all of its beauty and its horrors. In connection to this particular text, we also have something called a related media exploration. And so as we take a look at this related media exploration, it actually looks at the struggles refugees in our world face as they seek out safety and belonging in a new home. So I'm just going to take a moment and open this really, really quickly. And as it's opening, some of the questions that students are being asked to wonder is to make those connections, like what was happening in the fiction and what parallels or what is it teaching us about the world around us? And so in this exploration, students are looking at videos, they're reading nonfiction, they're engaging in turn-in talks, like here's one here. What does it mean to seek a refuge? You know, what does it actually mean to be a refugee? And then here students are watching a video about what it doesn't mean to be a refugee and the voice of the persons who live there, as well as additional 500,000 South Sudan, refugees flee to Uganda. And so here again, students are learning about the world around them and really building knowledge between the fiction and the nonfiction. So as we head back to this particular lesson, I'm going to take us into something, this particular reading text called American Journal. And so one of the things that I want to highlight in this last few minutes that I have to speak with you is just how technologically rich our platform is. When we talk about our platform being technologically rich, it's not just housing PDFs. It is really creating a unique experience for how students interact with the text and they learn. So this is a poem that students read in this particular unit. And before they read it, we actually have students write a journal. So like, what would it be? What would an alien notice about American culture? Like, oh, let's think about something different than just what we think about every day. What might be unusual and surprising, right? So thinking about how might somebody from the outside see our world. Then as we look at this poem itself, it's a little bit complex. It's written weird. It's got these spaces. They're not really using complete sentences. So one of the great aspects of our platform, it allows us to zoom in to language in certain ways. So like, let's zoom into the stanza and let's just look at this one stanza and let's ask some questions about it. When reading the poem, what do you think you should do when you get to a large space? So just looking at getting familiar with the poem. As we move through the different levels of learning, students here now get to actually hear the poem. So instead of focusing on its structure and what it looks like, let's listen to it. And let's make some hypotheses. Let's make some connections. What do you think things mean? To get curious about the poem. Ultimately, students will see the entire poem in its completion after seeing a smaller part, getting familiar with the layout, after hearing it, and they dig into more questions. So again, our platform really is allowing the technology to create novel and unique ways for students to engage in the learning. Now, one of the last things I'm going to tell you about are some of our future tech integrations. I'm going to take you to what we like to call mock-ups. And so this is an example of two features that are in the works. So one of the things about this technology, I am a former teacher or former coach, and I would just be fawning like at the mouth to have access to this technology. So this first one that we're looking at is a monitoring tool that allows teachers, to see informative snapshots in the moment. So this first one shows you which students are ready to share. So it gives you progress monitoring, which students are done thinking and want to share their answer. So if you see this green hand, those students are ready to share. This is in the moment monitoring that teachers would have access to as a part of their dashboard. I'm going to take you to one more on page 9. So we have lots of these here. And this one right here shows you not only who's completed the assignment, because this is a write where students have to write an answer. In one snapshot, I have all of the answers that students have submitted. This is pure gold. As a teacher, I can sit down and say, okay, I think we're getting what we need, but let me go check in with Aaliyah because Aaliyah really got this. Maybe Aaliyah might want to share with the whole class. So these future tech integrations are really going to set us apart from other curriculum in that we are a truly digital platform. And that works whether the teacher is sitting in the room with a student or whether they're working online. As we've known in the last year, looking at learning online is different configurations for learning. This is a boon for teachers to be able to check in with students in real time to know what students are doing. So as I go back to our materials page, the last thing I'm going to share is support and resources. We wanted to make sure teachers have what they need to be successful using the platform itself. I can't begin to tell you how many burdens to curriculum implementation are in place when you're just not even familiar with the thing you're supposed to be using. So this website provides how to print your activities, like assignments, how to offer teacher choice. But then also in the moment, I can click this help. And this help is going to open a chat bot. And this chat bot is going to take me to one of our CommonLit support specialists. I can type my question in, and in the moment, I can get immediate support. And so those are just a few of the tech pieces that just really set CommonLit 360 apart. Michelle, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And I'm going to send this back to you. And that concludes looking at CommonLit 360.
Oh my gosh. Thank you so much, Adrian. That was incredible. And Adrian, yeah, you joined us right when we were just starting to write CommonLit 360. And I remember, when we just had the vision in 2018, it's really, you've seen the whole evolution. Thank you for that. So I really want to give Eric, and I think he just hopped off, but hopefully he'll come back on in just a moment. Eric and also Jennifer, some time to share a little bit more about their experience. So let me just have you kick it off, our panel discussion, Eric. And can you tell me a little bit about, how you got started with 360, about WLA and your school's experience being literally the flagship school and the co-designers of high school?
Sure, thanks. It honestly started from a student's recommendation. So at WLA, we are a school that is really about just like creating young leaders who thrive in the world and change it for the better. And one of those pieces is just making sure they're advocating for themselves. So we had a student that wanted to see a curriculum that was more engaging, that reflected more of themselves and their identity and their experiences. And so CommonLit was a recommendation that came from them originally, and we sought that partnership out. And what we started to appreciate right from the get-go was this sense of partnership that, as Michelle illuminated before, like the observation hours, the direct feedback, the adjusting and changing to, like, this was something that was constructed over time and has gotten better and better over the years of these, like, pre 360 times. But I think for me, what was really a critical point that, as you saw earlier too with the data, like the data immediately increased from the first year of implementation. And I think even now more so, it's something even more critical now. Like, we know the pandemic hit. We know we switched from in-person setting to a remote setting, and that growth didn't stop because of the pandemic. Students were already acclimated and used to this digital format. So the time when we switched to a remote session, it seamlessly happened. Thankfully, we saw like continued growth with our students in our map testing that we do each year. We also continue to see growth from that fall to winter, which is actually one of our strongest segments of growth from one test to the other. And I think that's a testimony to the type of material that our students are being exposed to. And I think as an administrator, I think there's two things that really come to mind that are really critical for me when it comes to thinking about curriculum and like its selection and how it operates with our staff and also our students. I think for the student side, it's about engagement. Like, is this truly reflecting our students' identities and experiences, and can they actually feel authentically engaged with it? And here we did see that. We saw that they were appreciating the stories that were selected. We saw that they were actually handpicked authors from local settings, and also just like stories that they normally wouldn't have read if they were going through the traditional Eurocentric canon. And then I think the other piece is like thinking of it from the staff side, from our teacher side, is like, the amount of time that you sometimes can spend, like I was an ELA teacher before I got into administration, and the amount of time that you can spend trying to search for the right materials and the right things and constructing all the questions to make sure that you are assessing your kids correctly, it can really be time consuming. It could take up your whole night, your whole week. So to be able to have this all in one package, like as you saw also with like earlier where people were giving feedback, how much it saves time and all, like that is a true gift. Like, we'd rather spend that time actually going through things that could be helpful to kids rather than just searching for it in the beginning. So I think that was a huge win for us to be able to just like hand over this package of like, here's this curriculum, work with it, and use it to the best of your ability to teach our students. And I think even like sub points to that too is like how much flexibility there is for there still to be some adaptability. You saw that there were PowerPoints that were embedded, but we still encourage our teachers to, embed their personality into it, make it their own, be flexible with it so that, the kids still see a part of you in it. And I think the other piece is just like thinking about the actual like input and feedback that was given from teachers about like the types of questionings, the type of things that are used to assess. Like, you're seeing how the students getting these questions over time and getting accustomed to these types of like higher level thinking questions. Like, this is the type of work that we need our kids to engage in all the time. Like, it is guaranteed, and I've shared this before with other groups, that another like tough part about searching for the right like material and curriculum is that like you want to make sure it's on grade level. And like with this, you are guaranteed that whatever grade level you are working with, so our kids are 9th and 10th graders, for those 9th and 10th grade years, they are working with 9th grade material and 10th grade material, and they are working with questions that are going to push them so that they're getting mastery of those certain standards. And I think that's something that's like, really important as we talk about opportunity gaps, as we talk about with the student populations that we serve. WLA is predominantly Black and Latino. And we also have like, our socioeconomic status, about 95% of our students are on free reduced lunch. And I think it's critical as we understand that like they need to be exposed to on grade level material. If you look at the research, unfortunately, a lot of times urban schools and settings, they're not getting exposed to on grade level work. But with this material, with this curriculum, that's a guarantee. So in my book, that was a win, and we're going to continue to use it. And it's been nothing but benefiting our students, and it's also been benefiting our teachers in the planning process, and it's supporting our students in that too.
There is so much there. I want to open the floor also to Jennifer to just kind of share openly about, how was it? And maybe if you could just start by sharing a little bit about maybe how does it compare to what exists out there? And then, what was it like for you teaching the materials?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for the question. So for me, as one of the 11 schools represented in New York City who, as I said earlier, had the privilege of being part of the pilot program, I have personally seen how CommonLit compares to other curriculums that I've been asked to teach and work with, both in this school and my prior school. And what I can say, what the major differentiation for me is just CommonLit continually evolves. And the fact that it is so digital and so fast-paced in the sense that, you know, there is such a push and such an insistence to grow and really take stock of, you know, what's going on in the world, what is happening around our students, right? Because if you think about it, if everything we teach in the classroom is so disengaged from what's happening in the world and what they're seeing on TV or what they're reading about online, it's increasingly difficult to make that meaningful, make that relevant to our students, right? So for me, it's just thinking about, again, as Eric pointed out, like the past year, of course, it was so difficult for everyone, but as a teacher, I can honestly say that CommonLit and having our participation in the pilot program prior to the pandemic really was extremely instrumental in ensuring that my students still felt challenged, that we felt connected from, you know, the student to teacher bond and that rapport. And it was just really incredible to see how CommonLit has evolved and has changed. So I'll just add one quick thing, you know, through our work as teachers, we are continually reminded that we are preparing students to be 21st century learners, right? And what does that mean? That means that they need to be digitally proficient. They need to know how to analyze a document, how to look at literature through an analytical lens. And all of that is really offered and I would say, you know, put on a platter, honestly, through this program, because this is the one program that's really helped me teach, right? Helped me step my game up, helped me think outside the box, right? And that's truly what I think we as educators need. Pre-pandemic, during the pandemic, you know, regardless of time frame, we need to continue to think about where are our students lacking and how can we address that? And I feel that CommonLit is really committed to helping us address that problem. And it feels that we are, you know, we're in this together to move that needle, as Michelle mentioned earlier. The market has been lacking, and I couldn't agree with that statement more. Those expensive programs are simply not enough. They are not diverse enough. They are not changing and evolving with the time. So this is the type of program that students really need. Thanks again.
There's so much there. And I want to make sure, like, if there are, at this point, if anybody has questions in the chat, now would be the point where we could start sourcing those questions and I'll kind of start reading them. But so, I mean, one thing top of mind for me is just the tech that we built. So, and the fact, I mean, you know, we had a pandemic in March 2020, and suddenly teachers all around the world had to reinvent learning through the internet. And we had been, you know, engineering this platform for the past 3 years. And this was, I think you both spoke to how timely this was. I think something that I get asked a lot, and probably from a lot of folks on the webinar today who are listening in, is like, okay, well, is the tech that you developed, does it only work just for a remote pandemic setting? Or can it be flexibly used in the classroom to advance learning, or if you're remote? So could y'all kind of illuminate how the tech works?
Jennifer, you may want to, because you're the teacher, so I think it sounds good to just come from the classroom. So go ahead.
Sounds good, Eric. So for me, just thinking about the day-to-day, the assessment tools are critical. One example I could provide would be like the grading feature. It's a tremendous time saver. It not only allows me to quickly get through those assessment questions and decide, how to proceed for that particular class, but so much of the data is laid out in a way that really allows me to pinpoint how I want to focus our class time, right? So, as someone, like I said, who started as one of the 11 pilot schools from New York City, we were full-time in the classroom. So I've had experience both in the classroom full-time, remote, hybrid, etc. And with that implementation of that technology that we have in our building, it really allowed for students to, take that extra step to utilize those support, those resources, for me to bring in those supplemental texts, videos. The multimedia approach is also very important for them to, think outside the box and really kind of question and challenge what it is that they're learning and talking about in the classroom. So I think, the fact that CommonLit does offer such a strong emphasis on technology is really just indicative of the forward thinking that exists. And this is absolutely the direction we're going in through education, through public school education. So just so important, and I love it. So
I'll just add a quick thing because you covered pretty much all the bases. I want to just highlight this too, is that like you saw earlier, there were printing capabilities too. And like for certain students, that was like something that worked out best for them when we were back in person, where we actually printed the materials ahead of time. But also on the flip side too, like our students do appreciate working on a computer. They just seem like it feels more like modern, more current. So that is something also to think about. And then one other piece too is like sometimes it is a little bit difficult for some of our teachers to adjust to like the actual implementation of it being online. So we've had some slow rolls where teachers did use the paper versions first and then eventually went to the digital platform 100%. But that flexibility is there. And also everybody dreads the time when the tech doesn't work. So if you actually have it printed out too, like there goes your safety net too. So it's all there. So definitely want to add those points.
I'm so glad you mentioned that. There are so many things I want to ask you, but I think we should go till maybe like 4:55. So for like 3 more minutes, and then I have a few more slides, and then we could wrap up with everyone. But so on my mind is a few things. One, and maybe you could just jump in and speak to any of these things. One is just like students and student engagement. Like, what was that like? What changes did you see? Another thing on my mind, well, maybe we could just start with that.
As an observer, like someone that isn't directly teaching students, but coming into classrooms and then seeing the learning that's going on, I think for me, I definitely saw, like, if I were to just like say overall, like the engagement was much stronger than if it would have been with a typical worksheet. I think unfortunately our kids can at times be worksheet out and just like not, it just is not as engaging as like when they have like the ability to look at a computer and like highlight certain things, put their own notes in. There's like so much more, I think, personality in that approach too. And then the fact that the teacher can still access all of that from that platform still. So like you still get that sense of highlighting, you still get that sense of like note-taking and annotation. So that isn't lost, even though it's digital. But I think that kids just, again, appreciate that they have that option. And even there's some times where like they'll have the ability to play the text out loud. They'll use headphones and then they can use it at their own pace too. So that's also helpful. So I think overall as an observer, that's what I've seen is that kids appreciate the different tools that come along with the actual platform itself.
I completely agree with that, Eric. I've obviously seen that as well on the teacher level. And one thing I wanted to add was just in terms of my own experience, the engagement came from the themes of these units. Truthfully, looking at what it means to belong, and as a 7th grade teacher, so many of my students, if not all, are asking those questions like, who am I? And who do I want to be? How do I want people to look at me? How do I look at myself? So much so much love for unit 1, unit 2. I mean, I can't really pick a favorite, but the giver. But it's so true to the person, right? Just like, what is it like to be an adolescent? Thinking about those growing pains, thinking about those social anxieties. And these units really brought in a lot of not only opportunities for students to reflect and write poetry, write memoirs, but partake in research, right? Look at the psychology end of things, look at conformity and how that changes social norms, and just so much there. So I think as a teacher, I've just been increasingly grateful for the direction that CommonLit has gone, and just like knowing and thinking about what students really want to read about. And that's truly invaluable.
I'm so glad that you mentioned that and that you appreciate our essential questions, because one fun fact is that the first version of CommonLit was just a set of essential questions. That's it. So I do think those really matter. That's what gets kids excited authentically in ELA. Well, thank you guys both so much for sharing and just for your time. I know, Eric, you're getting ready for the start of the new school year, and an hour is precious. And Jennifer, I just appreciate it so much. I know this is your summer break. And so you should be living it up, but so thank you. So I have just a few more slides to share, and then we can wrap up. So let me go back to my deck here. And let's see. Can you all see my screen? Is it the CommonLit dashboard, or is it my slide deck?
It's moving slow, but you're in your deck now, so you should.
I'm in my deck now. Okay, good. Okay, so a few things was just before I wrap up. Oh no, we're not going to watch that. Sorry.
So one of the
this is actually really interesting, and as part of the follow-up to the presentation, I'll share Terry Bradshaw's testimonial. She is a district in, sorry about that. She is a district in Tennessee. But so I just wanted to share big picture, kind of the overall, zooming out again, our overall roadmap. So we have, the first 3 years of our implementation, we were focused on observational approaches to really meet the needs of our users. But now we're moving into a different stage of our growth. CommonLit 360 is now live to the public as of June, and we're going to start recruiting schools for a longer study and a more in-depth study that will take 2 years. So we'll be studying utilization, and then we'll actually be doing a randomized control trial study to measure our impact. So that is something really exciting on the horizon in partnership with Mathematica. So we're just at this moment where CommonLit is in an extremely high growth period. We now have over 20 million teachers and students that are registered for the site. So, the materials that Adrian just shared with you, teachers are all on break right now, but in a couple weeks, the million teachers that have CommonLit accounts are about to check their emails and see that their year has just been planned out for them. So we are just so excited for, a really intense year and another high growth year. We're also, entering, we already have a foothold in the market in the supplemental space. So today we have 17% of the market share. So now we're moving into becoming a core instructional provider and what that means. So I know I've talked to many partners on the call about what this will look like for CommonLit to compete in a brand new market, and how we're going to really need to level up in a lot of ways now that we're a core instructional provider. So I'm excited for more discussions about that. And then last, just there's so much demand and excitement around CommonLit 360. So, to assess this, we did a quick, we randomly selected 128 teachers, and we asked them just Do you have a curriculum? Do you have a curriculum that you regularly use? And only 12.5% said that they had something purchased and that they actually had something and they weren't looking for anything else. So the market is wide open for us to come in and disrupt it with this incredible program. So I think that's actually all the time that we have today. It's just now getting up to the hour. And so I just want to be respectful and thank our guests and thank everyone who joined today. I've recorded this. You'll be getting a follow-up from me. Send me an email with other questions or whatever is top of mind. And again, thank you to our guests and to Kara on Q&A. And thank you so much to Adrian. For all of your work in building this and now demoing it and advocating for it. So have a great afternoon and thank you again.